also think of young women, and you've had a previous town hall where you spoke with a young woman named Kim Corbin, who was a college student who was brutally raped in her dorm, and she was under the age of 21. And one of the things that she speaks out about loudly now is how she wished she would have had the ability to be able to have a shotgun, whatever it was, to be able to defend herself. I was 20 years old when I lived on my own. I didn't live with my parents when I was 20. I lived on my own when I was 20 years old. And I didn't, well, not at first, but I mean, I had a shotgun. But I think that we have to take that into consideration. We have to think about individuals. I mean, if you're old enough to vote, you're old enough to drive a car, you're old enough to serve your country, I think that you are old enough if. Now, here's the caveat, if anyone wants to listen to the caveat. The caveat, though, Jake, and for everybody out there, is if you are not a danger to yourself or others.
There we have it from last night's town hall meeting. Again, I don't see a lot of give and take here. It's beat up the people that are pro-Second Amendment. Good morning, Kevin Miller with you here at KIDO Talk Radio. Our great friend Russ Fulcher's on his way in. Russ, take your time. You're on the connector. We'll talk to you in a minute. Let's continue on taking your calls concerning your reaction to, well, the issue involving guns, concealed carry, and keeping kids safe. Jesse in Meridian with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Jesse.
Good morning, Kevin. Just a little preface on this quote that I'm going to give you. My father, Jack Stewart, started the Northern California Militia, and he started and opened 2 different gun clubs. And he gave me this quote years ago, and it's powerful. To conquer a nation, first disarm its citizens. And that's a quote by Adolf Hitler. Interesting.
It is. I've heard that quote before, and your reaction to this continued attack on people, comparing Senator Rubio to the killer, saying, and again, we want to be sensitive to these children, but when you start making inflammatory statements that we're going to protect you to a mother that better than you protect your own kids, and I'm going, that's a pretty ignorant statement. It's a pretty emotional, ignorant statement to say to someone, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, to say that we're going to protect you. And I'm thinking, based on what life experience? Based on what?
Yeah, I'm a real believer in getting rid of these signs that say gun-free zone. That's an open invitation.
Well,
let's replace that with signs that say every teacher in this school is packing heat. And then they'll think twice.
Exactly. Jesse, thank you for the call.
Thanks, Kevin. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Gun-free zone to a maniac, because they're all cowards. A gun-free zone is let's go in and let's attack, because bullets aren't coming back at us. And if you do this, and a lot of people are talking about it, and it's certainly a point that we'll discuss, but concealed carry for teachers and for people of talent, of that type of talent.
Brian in Nampa with Kevin Miller at KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, Kevin. I just wanted to make 2 points. You remember when I called in and said that here in Idaho they weren't allowing resource officers to have AR-15s and safes in the schools? Remember that?
Right.
Anyway, all of a sudden Florida sheriff says he's going to give AR-15s to all of his resource officers. And I'm just curious if they're going to allow them to pack them in schools. My second point is this. I drove a school bus here in Idaho. Are you guys all aware that as soon as you step on a school bus, whether or not you have a concealed weapons permit, it is not legal to have a firearm on a school bus? So you're effectively disarming the person that could defend your children while they're driving them to school. And they wonder where the problems are.
Brian, based on your lengthy experience that you've told us about here at KIDO Talk Radio, what is your response when you hear these kids and others saying, get rid of the guns, don't accept money from the NRA, guns are bad, laws will protect us?
I think the federal courts have ruled that basically cops don't have to defend you, that it's the individual person's right to defend themselves. So that already answers that question. But I also find it interesting that the liberal left believes that an 18-year-old who's an adult can't have an AR-15, but a 16-year-old can dictate national policy. And if you go to a clinical psychologist or a biologist or a neurologist, they will tell you their brains aren't developed yet. So, to be honest, Kevin, I understand they're hurting. We have all lost family and friends in horrific ways, but I don't listen to 16-year-olds about national policy. It's that simple.
Brian, thank you for the call. 580-5436. 580-KIDO, of course, also CNN getting busted with scripting questions. More of your phone calls in a minute, but let's take a listen to this report out of Florida where we had a young, brave ROTC student that shielded others with his body, wanted to speak. CNN said, great. And then all of a sudden this happened.
Jack McLeod is a junior at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High and was there when the shots were fired. He says the CNN town hall is another way for the public to see his generation's activism.
I have friends that have already, been at the White House, talked to Donald Trump. I have friends in Tallahassee, so I hope that this is the last time that anybody has to experience this and everybody can feel our pain so that nobody has to experience it firsthand.
I expected to be able to ask my questions and give my opinion on my questions.
But Colton Hobb, a member of the junior ROTC who shielded classmates in the midst of terror, says he did not get to share his experience.
CNN had originally asked me to write a speech and questions, and it ended up being all scripted.
Colton wrote questions about school safety, suggested using veterans as armed school security guards, but claimed CNN wanted him to ask a scripted question instead, so he decided not to go.
I don't think that it's going to get anything accomplished. It's not going to ask the true questions that all the parents and teachers and students have.
And there we have it. Let's get some reaction. KIDO Talk Radio. Terry, good morning.
Good morning, Kevin. I'm going to give you some thought-provoking material here. Nobody's talking about it. The majority of these mass shootings involve psychotropic drugs. Now, we hear that, but nobody says, well, this is what a psychotropic drug does. In your brain, you have what are called neurotransmitters. They're a bunch of different chemicals, and they communicate back and forth with each other. Well, guess what psychotropics do? They stunt and they alter the ability for these neurotransmitters to communicate back and forth. Well, here comes the thought-provoking material. Okay, if the Bible tells us to avoid sorcery, sorcery is pharmakia, drugs. Okay, so we don't do illegal drugs. Well, why in the heck do we take these demigods' word at it that their drugs are safe? Now, chew on that, everybody. We're giving our kids psychotics. And that was my thought for the day, Kevin, and that needs to be really addressed because this isn't a gun issue. This is not a mental issue. In many cases, it's a chemical issue. And, when you look at the ability for just nutrition in and of itself, when you take people who are doing psychotropics, a majority of them have a magnesium deficiency. Oh, gee, a bottle of magnesium is $10. So we really need to address all of this and stop getting caught up in the left-wing battle. We need to help our children, and it's not going to be by a law. We have all these things that can, of course, alter what is happening. When we do need some kind of security in our schools, because it's the world we live in. Everybody out there watches stuff on television. They shouldn't watching our children or programs with it. But then we give them psychotropics. Kevin, that's my thought for today. I just wish it's something that they would look at very closely. It's something that is hidden and kept away from the public by the mainstream media. You can go to any one of your medical journals and read about this. Any one of them. New England Journal of Medicine. There you go, everybody. One of the most prestigious. Look it up yourself. See what the effect is on the individual.
Terry, thank you.
Kevin, have a good day.
All right, our great friend Terry from State College, Pennsylvania. Back to Jim, who's stuck in traffic. Jim, good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Kevin. First, I want to say that when the folks tell you the roads are slick, they're not fibbing. There's a whole bunch of folks that are in the news and on the news and reporting the news, and talking about news and calling into shows like this that wouldn't know an automatic rifle from an automatic washing machine or a 10-round high-capacity magazine from a high-capacity drum. The other thing is that we're looking at the effects of our society, and Ray, I believe, just said this is the world we live in. One of these days we got to ask the question of how did we get here? We got video games and board games and card games and school games that glorify this whole shoot 'em up thing and have for years. Our society is programmed and trained to do this. This should not be a surprise to anybody, really. So it's not about the guns, true, and it's not about the drugs alone. It's all that stuff together that we're doing as a society. And the politicians are, trying to keep us focused on what's right ahead of us, and it's what's right behind us that's the problem. And that's all I got to say about that.
Jim,
Have a great day.
I hope you're not stuck in traffic for much longer.
I'm going sideways now, so we're moving.
Take care, brother.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
To everyone at the NRA and everyone affiliated with the NRA, we are not afraid of you.
Liberal Steve, good morning. You're on with Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio.
I'm not afraid of you, Kevin Miller.
There's really not much to be afraid of.
Going down a slippery slope here. Trying to ban the AR-15. It's not an assault rifle. It's not even an automatic rifle. Semi-automatic. Yeah, there's a lot of them out there. As fast as you can pull the trigger, or as fast as you can pull the clip out and slap in a new one. So, yeah, I got a feeling things will die down in about, it's pretty intense, so about 3 weeks. You know what the AR stands for on an AR-15, right?
No.
Well, see, the AR-15's been around since the 1950s. It was manufactured in the not the late, but the 1950s. It was named after the company. The company was Armalite. It's like it sounds, Armalite. So that's where it got the nickname AR for Armalite. So it's not assault, and it's not a military weapon. Wouldn't hold up in sand and dirt and water and everything else, like the M16 especially. So, yeah.
Right, it's the civilian version of the M16, right?
Yeah. So
I never really cared for I never really cared for the M16. I don't know if there's a civilian version of the M4, which is what I think most of the folks carry today. At least they did in Iraq when I had the chance to go over with those guys.
Yeah. Well,
M4 is a smaller version of the M16, but it's like a mini M16. I'm sure someone can explain that to me.
Yeah. I don't know. I trained heavy in the M60.
The M60?
Yeah, I don't know why, but I was supposed to carry the M60. Now, who wants to lug that thing around with an extra barrel?
You must have been a big boy to be able to carry that. That's a heavy weapon.
You know me, Miller. There's shooting going on. I'm running the other way.
I don't know about that.
Yeah, but no, it's a slippery slope, and the age thing would probably be the best they could do, and the mental illness thing. Make sure people like Terry and no one else has one, but make sure he's up on his magnesium. But yeah, it'll be age. If you get up the age for a little more maturity, and then again on the mental illness. Like there's no ifs, ands, or buts, or however you want to pronounce it. They dropped the ball on this kid. They definitely dropped the ball. He should have been stopped a long time ago, and they had plenty of reason to stop him from owning anything and get him help. Anyway, you stay fired up. It'll be filed under...
kind of like this phone call. We should have stopped it about a minute ago.
Yeah, this whole thing will be filed under the big S, so you know what happens. Bye, Kev.
Bye-bye, Liberal Steve. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. So, Ray Maya, you're going to love this one. We're going to have our friend Russ Fulcher on with us tomorrow as well, but we're going to have him here today. So, Russ, you're going to make the morning promo. This is, the great thing about age is that you can admit when you're wrong. So we had you scheduled for today with you, and then I had you scheduled with Ray for tomorrow. But since we haven't had you on in a while, we'll have you here today, and you don't mind coming back tomorrow?
No, I'd love to do it. And then tomorrow, hopefully, I'm not slipping and sliding on the way in like I was today.
Can you give us a road report?
Oh, my gosh, stay off it.
Really?
Just stay off it. This is Idaho, and typically, I think, as Idahoans, we're used to this kind of weather. But when you have this kind of downfall on the roads, it just literally turns into an ice rink. And so that's exactly what it is on 84 from Meridian to Boise. And so just if you possibly can, stay off it. It's gonna melt shortly.
Well, you were willing to phone in on the connector, and I'm going, oh, keep your hands on the wheel, brother.
Yeah, well, I do have the little hands-free earpiece,
Sure.
which I think is smart for everybody. But, I didn't want to miss my time with Kevin Miller.
Well, we appreciate you. Before we get into, obviously, the gun issue and stuff, and we'll talk more about the campaign tomorrow here at 580-5436-580-KIDO. What do you make of the Idaho legislature, what's going on? I know that's not your thing, but you spent so many years in the state Senate. It's true to your heart. It's what you believe in. With the Republican majority, being the caucus leader, what do you make of this session? Have you had a chance to kind of...
I have. I've been tracking. It's hard not to. And honestly, given what I'm trying to do now, I need to be tracking that to try to measure what's going on within Idaho's leadership. And so... this is every single legislative session takes on its own certain dynamic, and this one is no different. Some things appear to be very, very similar. You've got leadership of both parties who are trying to manipulate everything, and some things remain the same. You have the strength of the people and the strength of a lot of the legislators who will inevitably insert themselves and disrupt what's going on, and that's what needs to happen.
Russ Fulcher joining us. More with Russ in a minute. First, traffic and weather together. And back with Russ Fulcher, our great friend. Let's get to something, and again, near and dear to your heart. When you were in the state Senate, you fought for this for many, many years. In fact, it fueled your statewide effort, this repeal of the grocery tax. And now we're hearing our great friend, Representative Christy Zito, said today that they're going to try and make sure that it doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think after yesterday's actions on the tax bill, it probably will not happen this year. And years ago, Kevin, this goes back to 08, 09, myself and at that time Representative Cliff Bear championed the effort to start initiating a grocery tax credit because we knew that there had to be a staging in of grocery tax relief, and we had just come off the heels of raising the sales tax overall by a penny from 5 to 6 cents. Does it really make sense to tax something that absolutely everybody has to have? And so we started championing that effort. We did succeed in getting a grocery tax credit in place, but the intent was always to eventually eliminate it once you got staged in. We're there. That needs to happen. This is a regressive tax, and it's a shame that it hasn't this far, but I don't think it's going to happen this year either. It will, but it's not going to happen this year, I don't think.
As someone who has been intimately involved in the process, the making of the sausage, can you explain to us why it doesn't? There's a huge sense of frustration.
Yeah, I can tell you exactly why. And as with everything, there's competing interests. And so there are those who want to see another tax reduced more than on groceries, and they go in and they lobby hard, and they use their influence, and they champion what they want. And frankly, they should be able to do that. That's how the system works. I, for one, think the most fair thing to do is to give relief to the most vulnerable, and on an item that everyone has to have. I mean, and so. There's just a disagreement on priority, but this is a struggle of priorities, and that's what goes on in the legislature, that we all struggle over what the priorities are and slug it out as to where to move next. And in this case, it appears that there are priorities that have outranked grocery tax for tax relief this year.
Amazing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that. In addition to that, Senator Fulcher will answer your questions at 580-5436, 580-KIDO. And again, we'll have you back tomorrow at 8.
Great. That'll work. And I'll be here. I'll leave 2 hours early tomorrow.
All right. And Sandy says hello, and she says slippery and wet as far as the traffic reports. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Maggie. And KIDO Talk Radio, our great friend, Senator Russ Fulcher with us. First and foremost, we'll talk more about the campaign generally tomorrow, but, you know, I don't want to say we've never seen anything like this, but this reaction to the shooting in Florida, these town hall meetings, now you have kids across the country, including in Idaho, they're going to leave school to protest. Your thoughts on, keeping kids safe to begin with?
Well, I think everything has been said that is likely to be said, but maybe I say it just a little bit different. And I am getting questioned about it, Kevin. And to me, you have to put some perspective into this whole thing. And I just look at it and say, okay, to a crazy person, anything's a weapon. Okay, and just remember that if you really are bent on destruction, you're going to figure out how to be destructive in no matter the environment that you're in. And so let's flip things around a little bit and imagine for a second how many deaths, how much impropriety has been prevented by an armed citizenry. What is the impact of an armed citizenry on national security? I used to travel a lot internationally. 47 countries over the course of 20-some years, and this was something that would come up in business circles outside the country, and people would jokingly, but not so jokingly, say nobody's going to try to invade America, regardless of the technology, because you got 300 million people that are armed, and so we don't talk about that, but that is an interesting point, I think.
What about the Second Amendment when you have so many people saying that we need to look at it? A lot of emotion going on in the media, obviously. If elected to Congress, you're going to be facing proposals both strengthening it and perhaps weakening it.
That Second Amendment is there for a reason. And I think the president said it in some form, but there's truth into it. And that is that, yes, there is a cost of freedom, and we can forfeit that and be dependent on a third party to try to protect ourselves or to police indiscriminately, but it's just simply not the answer. I mean, if you start tracking this back at its core, back in the 1960s, we started changing our culture and changing our society and removing the principles that had built this nation for a couple of hundred years. And I'm talking about those foundational principles that are biblical in nature. And we started removing those planks from our public schools, from our public places, from our society. And, and now in the process, we've undermined the parents of people like this Cruz kid. Okay. Ultimately, we have to get back at strengthening the family and strengthening the infrastructure and adhering to the principles, the guidelines of life. And, the real problem of that specific case was what was going on between that kid's ears. And so I know that's not what the people in Florida want to hear, especially the kids in that school right now, but it's still the truth. And so if elected and put into the situation where I have an influence directly, that's going to be my position on it, is we have to strengthen the family, and that takes time, but let's get it on.
We go to the publisher of the Gem State Patriot, Tea Party Bob, on KIDO Talk Radio with Senator Fulcher. Good morning, Tea Party Bob.
Good morning, Senator Fulcher. Just a quick question. Since we're talking about this shooting, and that seems to be the only topic of conversation for today, I'd like to bring up the mental illness problem again and the fact that we don't take care of the people who have these problems. And when we do take care of them, we put them on these psychotropic drugs. The last 3 or 4 shootings, the mass shootings that have been perpetrated, Columbine, Sandy Hook, and this one, all of these kids were on some type of drugs. How would you fix the problem if you were in Congress? What would you do to make it better
because we're not taking care of the kids from a mental capacity, and we can surely protect them if we have outside guards. But how do you fix the problem, which is the children, and we're not taking care of them personally?
Bob, I thank you for the question, and it's not a simple answer, and I'm not going to be pretending that I'm going to single-handedly fix everything. But you have to go back to the principles. You got to go back to your foundational strength and the basis by which you make your decisions. And for me, that's adhering to a structure. That's adhering to a societal program that it actually engages and raises kids, actually engages and gives them passes along the principles that our nation was founded upon, and that means strengthening the family. And yes, you mentioned the drug situation and the prescriptions and those types of things. Those are Band-Aids for a much bigger problem. And so I would not be leaning towards trying to influence people's behavior with psychotropic drugs or anything else. It's a function of trying to give them attention and, quite frankly, the discipline that probably you and I had. I know I had growing up, and I'll bet you did too. And difficult situation to talk about, but we've strayed away from our foundation.
Thank you for that answer. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Bob.
All right, our great friend Tea Party Bob, GemStatePatriot.com. Pro-Life joins us now on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Pro-Life.
Good morning. President Trump has a policy on transgenders in the military, and he announced that he didn't want that he was barring transgenders from being in the military, and that there would be no more transgender operations paid by the military. Then, in court, said that he couldn't do that. And I've not heard anything about this. I've contacted all of the people from Congress from our district here in Idaho, and they never reply to me. But what would you do if you were back there? That's the question. But I have a comment that those judges, and it has to do with immigration of people, that might be terrorists, being blocked by judges. I say that those judges need to be impeached. Now, I don't know if you'd go back there and ask for impeachment, but there needs to be something to do about that, because courts cannot block a president as the commander-in-chief when he's within his jurisdiction making some decision. And Congress could make a decision on this and then tell the courts, listen, we've made our decision, we're backing up the president. So anyway, comment on that. And also, you can, if you want to throw in there, would you sponsor legislation having to do with personhood at fertilization? All right, that's all I got.
All right, Pro-Life, thank you for the call on KIDO Talk Radio.
Pro-Life, thank you for the question, and I would just paraphrase. I think in a way you've answered it at the same time. The base issue you raise is judicial activism. That was not the design of the judicial branch. The president has the executive authority to take executive action, and the Congress has the check and balance and the authority to make the laws. And so that's where I would be, and I would support the president's position on this, and either participate or support legislation that would back that. I don't like to see judges making those decisions and changing those outcomes. That was never the original design. They were called balls and strikes. And I forget the specific last question, but it had to do with sponsoring or supporting legislation that is pro-life at conception, and I certainly support that.
Russ Fulcher is our guest. We continue on at KIDO Talk Radio. Let's go to Jim in Middleton. And Jim, I apologize, I didn't get a chance to get back to you in Nampa the other night, but I hope you accept my apology, sir.
Oh, Kevin, no need for an apology. You're a busy guy, and a lot of people want to talk to you, so never feel that way. And no offense taken, but thank you for that anyway. Senator Fulcher, thank you for making yourself available to us. Appreciate that. I wanted to just chime in and let you know that, what we need, the citizens and our country, is we need strong, courageous representatives that are going to call things as they are and go on the offensive, not just to combat the left, the Democrats, and so forth, but to save the country. With this issue that we have going on now, and you've got all these poor, misguided children on the streets, I'd ask these kids an important question. Why now and not then, meaning in our time? Look at this in a logical way and look at recent history. Semi-automatics, full automatics were available to us in the 20s. Bonnie and Clyde used them. Nothing new about these firearms. And they were actually easier to obtain then than now. So this is not to insult or make these poor children feel bad, but to tell them the truth and to have a strong look at themselves, how they were raised, and what they're going to do in the future. Because these issues did not exist when I was a kid. I was running all over the Bay Area with no problems, with every nationality in the book. We had no race issues and so forth. Now I'm pushing 60, and I see these terrible things happen in our country. Anyway, Mr. Fulcher, you have my support, and I hope you'll be that courageous man to stand up and not back down like all of the other Republicans have.
Jim, thank you for the question, and thank you for the support. A couple of things popped into my head when you were talking there, and I agree with you, by the way. And one of the things I think has exacerbated the problem is, as a society, we've tried to kind of straddle the fence with policy to some extent. And so we've created these so-called gun-free zones and whatnot, and has been pointed out on the program earlier today. Where do these so-called shooters go when they're going to create havoc? They don't show up at the Second Amendment Alliance rally. They show up at a school that's a so-called gun-free zone. And so, because they are cowards, they might be mentally ill, but they're not so mentally ill that they go to a place where they know they're going to get blowback. And so I think that your point about playing offense is extremely important. The president has done that, and that's a style that I think has served him well and had some success. And frankly, I try to do the same thing. So I agree with you. I think your comments are valid, and I believe that I've exhibited some of that strength and courage in previous years, and I certainly intend on playing that out in the future.
Thank you very much for taking the call. Kevin, have a great day, both of you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye, Jim. Thank you. Let's go to Tom in Nampa for Senator Fulcher on KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning. Senator, the kid down in Florida, screaming nut bar, no question about that. Lots of indicators. What are you going to do to, take him off the street? An involuntary internment in a mental facility? Because that's going to be a tough thing to get passed through the legislature alone. And can you get 4 psychiatrists to agree that somebody's nuts? Because I've seen a lot of guys on the street that are like, okay, I think he's nuts. So how are you going to pull that rabbit out of hat?
Yeah, well,
that's a tough one.
I agree with you, and that's why those things have to be addressed up front. If you're going to get to a person, it needs to be early on. And I don't know this kid's history, Tom, but whatever it was, this wasn't the first time he's acted out. This is the worst time he's acted out. But there was a lot of missed opportunities along the way. And that kind of goes back to the previous comment I was trying to make on, all right, where have we broken down and within the school system or within the family structure to not properly try to keep this kid between the rails. But once he gets to this stage, then he's reached a destruction point, and you're right. We're not going to be able to just solve that and make it all go away. So I think once again, it goes back to what I was trying to talk about earlier. You got to be working on this. You got to be working on this at the family level. You got to be working on this within the overall health of our society. But great question, great point.
Concur with your words. The big thing is, if you can, because if the kid doesn't want to go to the psych center, and there isn't a mechanism to compel him to do that, then you can have all the red flags in the world, but unless you can actually actively do something, it's not going to make all that much big a difference. Plus the fact, you're going to have to craft legislation very, very carefully, because if you don't, the ACLU will go absolutely nuts. That's one of the reasons in the late 60s, early 70s, you saw the huge rise in homeless people, because the ACLU decided that we were violating their rights by locking them up in mental institutions where they actually got fed, clothed, housed, and were on the streets, basically dying over a period of a few years.
Tom, let me just, I'm not sure if you're suggesting something or not, but here's a red flag popped up when, at least to me, while you're talking there, because you've got two general bases, if you will, for decision making that we as leaders adhere to, and that's either the citizenry or government. And yes, there is a fine line between who should be making what call, but just understand that personally, it's my belief that the citizens should ultimately be the decision makers in situations like this. And I am not in favor of trying to create laws that give agencies or bureaucrats an inordinate amount of power to come into our houses or come into our businesses and on some kind of a suspicion pull someone out and institutionalize them. That sounds really dangerous to me. And I know in a case like this where there's so much emotion, it's easy to say, well, we should just done that. But think of the overall ramifications. What if someone were to say that think of what somebody accused Tom of being a nut job, and so there was the authority for them to come into your house and take you and institutionalize you. Maybe it's legitimate, maybe it's not. I am reluctant to try to just turn that power over to the government. Once again, it goes back to we got to try to reach these kids earlier and be vigilant along the way. Yeah, who saw him headed towards the school? Who saw him, ahead of time? And there were tips to the FBI. How come we didn't follow up on it? That's a vigilance issue, and I think that Jefferson made a quote years and years ago that was the cost of freedom is eternal vigilance, and that applies here.
Exactly.
All right, Tom, thank you for the call. Let's quickly get to Julie in Boise. We're short on time here. Julie, good morning.
Good morning. I wanted to briefly say that, you pretty much hit on all the topics I was going to bring up. Things need to be privatized now because a lot of the proactive preventative measures are far away from the situation. In this case, people are crying out louder than normal because they were there. They knew. There was a culture. Everybody in that city knew about this guy. When he was expelled, there should have been a video and a psychologist there. And then he was deemed okay because his mother was alive and he was undergoing treatment. There should have been a system that triggered something somewhere that when his mother died, there's a problem here. But see, everybody in that town, not everybody, but majority of the people in the school and around that area knew. And they expect to be protected because that's where we place our trust. I think now it's time to transition to privatization. Learn from this and learn what we can do to fix the problem so it doesn't go from prevention to reactive and then on-site combat,
Great point, Julie. More with Russ Fulcher next. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. And here we are. Welcome back. Senator, you've got about a minute. By the way, you'll be on tomorrow at 8 o'clock. And we appreciate you coming in. Again, my bad, bungling the schedule, confirming with you, and then switching the date on Ray Amaya.
Well, my bad, and maybe not leaving 2 hours early to get here instead of 1, so on a snowy day.
So we've got about, let me get traffic and weather because that's very important today. And back to Julie's point, Senator Fulcher, being proactive instead of reactive. Your thoughts?
I agree with Julie on that point, and that's really our only and our best option right now. And so, reflecting back on what she said, I agree with her.
Finally, let's go to Chris in Meridian, who you've got the last 20 seconds. Chris, go ahead.
Real quick point, the mass shooting in Florida and also the mass shooting in Texas, both these people were flaunting on social media about having weapons, looking like a menace. And to me, I think that would be the first thing I would look at. These people are making it obvious what their viewpoints are. So anybody that's flaunting a machine gun on social media, take note. They should have a hard look at them.
Hey, Chris, I would just say there goes the vigilance issue that was raised a couple hundred years ago by Thomas Jefferson. That's part of our vigilance. That's a sign. I agree with you. We should be taking note of that.
Chris,
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Chris. Senator, if people want to get a hold of you,
RussFulcher.com. And please reach out. Need the counsel, need the communication. Looking forward to it, and I'm easy to find.
Senator Fulcher, we'll talk to you tomorrow. You're listening to Kevin Miller on KIDO Talk Radio. Ray Amaya, great job. Good day. God bless, and keep the faith.